Hello, my name is Carl Ratner, and I'm a voice teacher at Western Michigan University. This is the second video about Russian pronunciation for singers who are trying to learn to sing in Russian through IPA. And of course, I recommend that you learn the Cyrillic alphabet if entirely possible, because that gives you the chance to make choices that the person who's doing the IPA transcription has made for you. And that especially applies to the vowels, which is the subject of this video. So there are really five main vowels in Russian, but there are some subtleties when the vowel occurs in different situations, and we'll go through all of those. The first vowel is the regular Russian ah vowel, which is considered the same as the dark ah that you have in French. It's more or less the same as many speakers when they say ah as in father. And that's the one that's written with a plain A without the little cap on the top, which is 90% of the time when you have that letter. However, between soft consonants, the A becomes brighter, and that's when they use that other printed A with the little cap on the top, which is pronounced like the bright A in French. So for instance, and it occurs when the A is surrounded by two soft consonants. So for instance, the word счастье, счастье. Because the surrounding consonants are both soft, the vowel gets a slightly brighter ah sound instead of the regular Russian ah. The next vowel is the epsilon, that is the usual E vowel sound for Russian, and for instance in the word let. However, it also occasionally, you'll see instead of the epsilon, the regular E, which is a closed E in IPA. Again, that happens between two soft consonants. So for instance, the word здесь, здесь. Then you get rather a bright E sound indicated by the regular E instead of the epsilon. The epsilon is the regular E is E. Now, the O, there's a little problem with the O. Don't tell any Russians I said this, but the fact is that in Russian, the O is generally a kind of a diphthong. Of course, it is in English, too. Our O starts with some kind of a schwa sound, goes through an open and closed O, and ends in a with a U or a W glide. So if I say the word window, if I say that in slow motion, window, you can see all the different vowel positions that our O goes through. The Russian diphthong is much less complex, but it starts closer to a pure Italian O, as in come, and ends up somewhere close to a schwa, or. That's the way they do it in speaking. Some singing students will attempt to sing it that way, and the results really aren't very good. So you'll see that some transcribers use a regular O, some use an open O for the letter O. I think it's best to think a regular Italian O, and then that you're modifying it slightly for singing in the open direction. So, so you have the word vote, for instance, vote. It's not quite vote, it's not quite vought. Certainly not the American aw as in law, which doesn't even really have any real lip rounding when we say it because we're lazy. So, vote, somewhere between O and aw. But Russians actually have a difficulty pronouncing the words like Gott in German or notte in Italian, because their O is a bit more closed than that. The letter U in IPA is a pure Italian oo sound, so like the word in the word nu. It doesn't have a, in English, we even diphthong our U sound, so we say new, new. You can see how my lips are sort of evolving in that vowel. In Russian, nu. The lips essentially stay in the same position for the whole time, as they do in Italian. The two E vowels, so the one that is symbolized by just the plain letter I, is very much like an Italian E sound. Perhaps a tiny bit brighter, because in Italian there's only one sound, whereas in Russian, as in English, we have to distinguish between two. The other is the letter I with the little slash. That's a sound that we don't really have in English. It's called, usually it's referred to by its sound, E, but fortunately for us, that sound is never made, it never begins a word. You never have to start from scratch. You always have the consonant to help you, and that's really the way to go in learning to pronounce this vowel. The closest thing I've heard in English is the E sound in the word illegal, if you speak up with kind of a hick accent. Illegal. Illegal. So that's combining that very hard L that we also sometimes use in American with the E sound, illegal. So, so the trick is to say the consonant before the E with as if you are about to say an oo vowel. So let's say you were going to say boo, boo, a good Italian or Russian oo vowel, boo. So you start there, and then the second the consonant is over, you say E. B, B, B. What happens is the back of the tongue, which is slightly lifted for oo, is involved. So we're not lifting the middle of the palate as we do for a normal E vowel, which has a big smile, and the front and middle of the tongue are high. E, we start from a position with the back of the tongue lifted. B. So the word for to be in Russian is быть, быть, with a soft T at the end, a very hard B. So whatever consonant that you have is going to be very hard. Again, think of the word, as if you were going to say oo immediately following the consonant. So instead of mu, me, me, vi, li, si. So again, I'm not a native Russian, and you should certainly listen to the way true native Russians make this sound. But I think this will give you an approach so that when you're listening to them, you can get a better idea because you know what's involved. So in singing, I at least always try to make a kind of a darkish sound on my vowels, especially my E vowel. So you have a little problem in Russian because you're trying to distinguish between a very bright E sound and a very dark E sound. What I do, what I think is most important, let's put it that way, is the consonant before the E. If you get the consonant clear, then the E will almost certainly take care of itself. So if you say a very bright V, V, if the V is very clear, then even if your E vowel is sort of singerly, it will be understood. V versus V, 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 V. Notice also that the V is much brighter. Of course, you have to sing it at the pitch that it is in your song. But if you get the consonant correct, that will go a long, long way to making the vowel correct. Again, please listen to native speakers, unlike myself, attempting to pronounce this. Incidentally, that brings us to an important issue, which is we talked in the last time about consonants and just the tiny hint of a glide which you might hear as the palatalized consonant, the palatalized soft consonant is released. So, like if you said pyo, pyo, you might hear a tiny bit of, of y in there, not pya like we would say in English, piano, but pyo, pyo, just the very tiniest little glide. Well, you don't hear that at all before an E vowel. So it's just P, P. There's still, the tongue is still high for that consonant, but it's not P, P, or something like that. P. There's no J, there's no Y sound in there. P, P, P. So there's a slight difference. Which brings us to the question of vowel reduction. Several of the vowels get reduced in unaccented syllables. So, for instance, when you have the letter A in your IPA, you'll notice in Anton Bailov's transcriptions and some others that the height of the A is different sizes. This is because in Russian, the farther away from the accented syllable the sound is, unless it's the very first sound in the word, the farther away from the accent, the more like a schwa it will be. In other words, the less true color it will have, especially in conversation. In singing, we still leave a good bit of color in it, even if it's pretty far from the main accent.